Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the GDC Twitch channel. My name is Brian Francis. I am normally the invisible voice inside your head, but today I'm the very visible voice inside your head and in front of your screen. It's been a minute since we've been streaming, and we're back today with Command & Conquer, the Remastered Collection. And with me, in the lower left-hand corner of the screen, is my new friend, Jim Vesella. Jim, how's it going?
Hello, it's going great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, we're super happy to have you. A couple things for the audience. We're going to be having a chat with Jim for about 30-40 minutes. Unfortunately, the gameplay is pre-recorded, so if you're going to make fun of how I'm playing, guess what? Too bad. I can't fix it. Also, second confession, didn't play the original Command & Conquer because I was 6 or 7 when it came out, so this was all new to me. The concept of having no right-click was very scary. With that in mind, we're going to get started. As you can see, we're playing the first missions of the campaign of the Good Guys campaign, although some people will just be Good Guys because they love Kane. But Jim, would you mind introducing yourself and the work you did on Command & Conquer Remastered Collection?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm Jim Vesella. I am a lead producer at Electronic Arts, and I was the producer on the game, working with Petroglyph and Lemon Sky Studios to create it over the past 18 months. And I've been kind of the core person at EA, interfacing with all of our teams there, like QA and localization, to make the game happen, and working really close with Petroglyph on all of the design choices and art direction and everything like that.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm super impressed with this remastered product. This isn't the first remaster we featured on stream. If you dig through our archives, you'll find a chat we did with the folks from the Age of Empires remastered team who did some incredible work on that game. It's really cool to see 90s strategy games getting this remastering push from companies like EA. So I bet all the fans in chat are happy that you did this. And just as someone who's new to this whole world of Command & Conquer, this was fun. This was a blast from the past from the 90s. Look at this. Look at this full motion video that somehow still looks
beautiful.
Even with on a 1920 by 1080 monitor. So that gives us the opportunity to springboard into my first question, which is as a producer, sort of how did EA see the process for remastering a game like Command & Conquer, which was obviously developed under one set of development parameters and now has to function on machines that are much better, able to do higher definition graphics, even just a higher resolution. That alone changes how the game looks, how the game feels. So would you mind walking through the basics of that remastering process from that angle?
EA gave us actually a lot of autonomy in terms of how we wanted to kind of creatively approach the game, and the first step of that was reaching out to Petroglyph and hoping that they wanted to sign on board, and luckily they were very excited to jump back into Command & Conquer with us. Mm-hmm. And then working with Lemon Sky, who had prior experience doing remasters like this. Mm-hmm. And so they were pretty familiar with the process of how to do it, and some of the challenges they'd encountered before, and then other cool tricks that they'd learned along the way. And so we kind of brought those teams together, and then one of the unique things about this game is that we announced it before we even really started development at all, back in November of 2018. And so we were already getting feedback from the community before we even started pre-production. So they were super helpful in terms of guiding us in terms of how they wanted to see the game remastered. That led to a lot of our kind of bigger creative decisions about what to update, what to change, what to keep really authentic and core to the originals. And we've had this kind of back and forth collaboration with the community throughout the entire development. And so it was a really great process to kind of go through that, and we were inspired by some the Age of Empires remasters, by the StarCraft remasters, some of the other games that have gone down this road already over the past 6 to 7 years. And we're happy that Command & Conquer can help get RTS back on the map in that way.
Yes, sir. Unit ready. Cannot deploy here. Options. Building. Yes, sir. Unit ready. Building. Unit ready. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Yes, sir. Reporting. Underway, sir. Unit moving out.
Yeah, well, actually, it's a funny story there. We actually did not have the code. Yeah, when we started the game, we did not have any of the source code from some of the old Westwood properties. Fortunately, through working with Petroglyph and some of their archives, we were able to actually recover the old source code, and that then opened up kind of our very first big creative question, which is, do we kind of stick with, remastering the game in a very authentic way, using the old source code to keep that logic and the feel and the movement and the pacing exactly the same as the original, or do we want to kind of remake the game in an entirely different aspect? And through chatting, we actually did not have the code. Yeah, when we started the game, we did not have any of the source code from some of the old Westwood properties. Fortunately, through working with Petroglyph and some of their archives, we were able to actually recover the old source code, and that then opened up kind of our very first big creative question, which is, do we kind of stick with, remastering the game in a very authentic way, using the old source code to keep that logic and the feel and the movement and the pacing exactly the same as the original, or do we want to kind of remake the game in an entirely different aspect? And through chatting with the different development teams and then bouncing some stuff off the community, we felt it was best to kind of stick to the authenticity of the original games. That's it's such a special kind of historical piece of gaming for the RTS genre that we wanted to make sure that we could recapture that same feel. Mm-hmm. But then the other element was, what is too archaic and what should we really update to make better? And so the community was unanimous in that they wanted us to, for instance, update the UI. And the sidebar UI is something that we did a complete overhaul of from a design and implementation standpoint. And we think that's definitely for the better. Multiplayer is something that doesn't even work anymore in the formal games. Used to work on Westwood Online, the system from the 90s, over modems. And so, that was a piece of the game where we just rebuilt that entirely from scratch and added some new features there, like replays and observer mode and quick match and a leaderboard. So it was kind of this idea of keeping the core gameplay really authentic to the originals, but then wrapping it with a lot of these updates using some of Petroglyph's proprietary tech and trying to kind of approach the remaster that way. But yeah, in those early weeks, it's really about thinking about those kind of creative pillars and what are the core things we wanted to keep the same and what are the things that we wanted to see really updated.
Right on. Thank you for the folks in chat for helping me with my sound troubles. My microphone got unplugged, which is the most basic sound trouble you can have in a situation like this. Also, I will move on to my next question, which is, can you walk through, this is always one of my favorite ones, I actually really love how the classic sprites look in the video that we're watching here. You'll see a couple times where I chose to turn on the new high-definition graphics, but I kept switching back to these because I just love the look. It just, it's funny, to me as a newcomer, it clashed a little bit with the vibe of the game, but at the same time, I'm like, oh man, I like this, I would love... I'd love to play a game like this on my Switch, kind of, was what I feel like. This aesthetic is so good. But these sprites obviously were made for, like I mentioned before, a much smaller monitor than what I played on right now. So can you walk through the process of both, making the new high-definition graphics and making these classic ones work as well?
Yeah, and that was one of the best features that we could unlock by using the old source code, was the idea of this real-time graphic switching, which you can activate by pressing the space bar when you're playing in kind of single player. And it's just been a blast to see people, turn it on and off, and people who had forgotten what the old games looked like, and then being really surprised at what we used to play with back when the original DOS version came out at a 320 by 200 resolution on, what many people back then probably had, a 15-inch CRT or something. But the process to remastering the graphics was actually very similar to making a modern game. So Lemon Sky actually reconcepted every single asset in the game. So they'd go back to the hand-drawn sketches, trying to be inspired by what you'd see in the actual game, what you would see in the cinematics if possible, what there were some renders from back in the day in the manuals. So, we tried to take in elements of all those pieces to kind of reconcept what it would look like in kind of high definition. They would then go through the modeling process and then the texturing process, and eventually we would get to a really nice 3D model of every asset in the game. But then we put it through kind of the special rendering pipe, which would export it in the 2D sprites. So you'd have usually 32 angles for all the vehicles, or 8 different angles for something like the infantry. And then but it would also be with the animators, and if there were 650 frames of animation on, say, like a Grenadier or something, they'd have to reanimate and export that in every single frame to match 1-to-1 to enable that real-time switching. So the process was actually pretty similar to a modern game, but it was kind of that final step where we had to kind of take it into the sprite world. And then once you get it in game, you might realize that what you thought looked really good in the 3D setting just didn't really match with what was in game or what was in the legacy. So then we'd have to go through several kind of polish iterations and get really deep in there, and you'd be zoomed in and doing the back and forth and saying, the angle of that engine just isn't exactly right, we need to update that. And so we'd have to make a lot of kind of hand adjusted differences on the sprites to make them look just perfect.
You're gonna see later on in my pre-recorded video that there was a point where I did a like you can see kind of a double take I did, where there's kind of an asset that's floating. It's sitting on the left side of the map. It's off the playable area, but I'm like, wait, what is that? And I pop between the classic and the normal mode to try to identify it, and it looks like a downed helicopter. But when I look at the original asset, I'm like, oh man, how did anyone know what this was back in the day? And I was...
there's a great story behind that, and it's been kind of a conspiracy theory within the community for the past 20 years. To my knowledge, it was originally created, and it looks kind of like a UFO or something like that. And then a few years later, Westwood, they kind of confirmed it was supposed to be a downed helicopter, but no one really believed them. And we kind of went with that approach, that it would just kind of make more sense to be kind of the downed cockpit. But there's already been some mods actually made that you can find on the Steam Workshop of people remaking that particular asset as a more UFO-looking thing, perhaps to hint at the Skrin or something from the other sequels in the Tiberium universe. So it's just really fun to have the community kind of banter about that and debate what it actually should be, and great to see them already contributing their own creative take on it.
That kind of speaks to what the port does effectively. That I sort of stumbled into an old conspiracy theory about that, just by looking at that. And I think the only reason I paid attention to it was I was at some point I'd done a brief news story on Gamma Sutra, our sister site, where they were talking about the StarCraft remaster and how sometimes they were looking at the sprites for the old Zergs and were wondering, wait, what is that? Is that supposed to be a tentacle, a claw? It was something. Actually, we're about to see it. It's coming up on the left right here. Once I expand the field of view here more, or the fog of war, not field of view. But yeah, that I'm just it's. The fact that the remaster can just sort of kick off that old debate to a new player at the drop of a hat, I'm super impressed by that. Let's go to chat, because we started talking about mods, and chat is talking about mods and has a lot of questions about the future of Command & Conquer and EA. Like I've mentioned before, this is a dev focus stream, so we're gonna tweak everything for kind of a dev focus. But we also want to give you guys some credit. You're the Command & Conquer fans. We want to share your voice. Light Belgium would want to know, will we see mod support for multiplayer? And I guess I'm just kind of curious, how would that fit in with your approach for supporting mods with this remaster collection?
Yeah, the one challenge with getting mods in our formal multiplayer is that the game runs on dedicated servers, and so the servers don't really know about mods that would be kind of installed kind of locally on each player's different computers. So it's a little difficult to get the mods to work in online multiplayer, but something that we are looking at right now, which I've talked about in some of our community posts, is the concept of LAN play. and that's something that we want to get into our kind of post-launch efforts here. And LAN play would be able to support mods. And I know that there's the community's been talking. There's some good tricks they can do with VPN and stuff to kind of get LAN to work a little bit broader.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're hoping that LAN play can kind of be a potential outlet for getting mods to work in multiplayer. But we're constantly kind of taking in that feedback and seeing what the players want to see.
Oh, that's kind of cool, actually. And I believe Steam has some new feature where they're trying to help support. In their case, Steam is trying to support local multiplayer games being able to play online. I wonder if that extends. This is idle speculation. Please don't take this as a fact of any kind. If that kind of support is possible in the long run to do LAN style games over Steam's servers, but I don't know anything about that. It popped into my head. I am Prite wants to know, why can't we switch between old graphics and new graphics on the stream? Is it because of balancing issues? Oh, that may be because I think he's talking about online multiplayer. So I'm guessing,
Yeah.
Is that a balancing issue thing? Is that a tech issue thing?
Yeah, it's more of a tech thing. Getting the real-time switching completed in the first place was kind of a piece of technical magic by Petroglyph and Steve Tall, who is the original lead programmer on Red Alert back in 1996, and he's now the technical director at Petroglyph. So he was able to kind of make the real-time switching happen. And originally we actually just only had it in the campaign. That was the only place we could kind of get it to work properly. After hearing some community feedback, we were able to extend that into skirmish, which was great. So it now works in all of the kind of solo play modes. But just the way that the whole game is architected, the way that the servers work, I'm not a technical person, so I couldn't properly give it justice. But the team says that it's kind of technically infeasible to make it work for the online multiplayer, just given how the game is architected. So unfortunately, that's just something we weren't able to accomplish. But we've been really happy that people enjoy the mode in the solo play.
Bike Rush also wants to know why we're watching Legacy gameplay right now and whatnot remastered. Bike Rush, I mentioned this earlier. As a newcomer to Command & Conquer, I was trying to put myself in the shoes of what you all were experiencing back in the 90s. And also, when I was switching between the two modes, I just had a preference for this. Like I mentioned at one point, like you could take this whole aesthetic, make a new game on it that fits on the Nintendo Switch, and I would eat that up in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I mean that was one of the things that that was also one of those kind of creative pillars that we talked about at the very beginning of the project, was the idea of options. So we understand that there's some people who just love the legacy feel, they love the legacy look, they love maybe the legacy sound, and so we wanted to kind of provide options for all those in the remaster. So if you go to your options menu, you mentioned at the very beginning of the call, the kind of left click, right click. That was something that people debate about, and some people want to play with each. So we have the option to choose, right click mouse settings, left click mouse settings, right click scrolling on or off, unit queuing on or off, depending on how authentic you want to be. And even for the audio options, being able to listen to the old Eva voiceover versus Kaya's new recorded HD voiceover, or the same for the sound effects, or the same for the music. And so that idea of just giving players options and how they want to experience this, depending on their history with the franchise or not, was something that was really important to us.
Right on. There's actually a really good question in chat. Why was the Humvee and Longbow renamed? That comes from Badavin. Was that because of AM General / Boeing?
A little bit, yeah. So, there have been some, as I'm sure people have seen over the years, some lawsuits and some things around the naming of certain vehicles that are trademarked in certain, industry gaming franchises. And so that was something where, in terms of the time that we wanted to spend on the remaster, we wanted to spend it more on making the game, fantastic, rather than dealing with some of those kind of legal challenges. So yeah, we decided to kind of go with the simpler route there and just rename things. And we kind of pinged our community council about what names might be appropriate. And so we kind of named them in kind of the same theming as what some of the older vehicles were in the legacy, like the light tank. And so we came up with like the light scout. So that was just something that, was one of those things that didn't translate here 25 years later. But I think there's also been some mods already on the workshop that rename those if you so choose.
He thinks there's been mods. I bet EA would be like, what? We don't know anything about that.
Yeah, what are you talking about?
Squire would like to say that the quality of life options that are available in the settings are superb. Thank you. I'm going to Funny Guy 77. I like your question. I'm going to springboard off that because I think that's a good question for producer Jim, my new friend. Sorry, Jim, that's your nickname now.
Awesome.
You're no longer Jim Turn. You are producer Jim. Funny Guy 77 has a question about the sales of Command and Conquer. Sort of how well is it done? And can we expect other remastered games in the Command and Conquer series? I think you're about to see me discover that helicopter right now. Oh yeah, there we go. The way I would actually like to frame that for our any devs we have in the audience is also, what kind of sales goals does a game like Command & Conquer need to hit with a remastered collection? Because this isn't a fresh release. This doesn't have the same cost as a normal game, but this also doesn't have the same reach as a normal EA game that might be released if EA were to get back into strategy game development. So what are your thoughts? Like, what were sort of your thoughts as a production team about how the sales for this game had to do?
It's a pretty loaded question, and obviously there's a lot of economic factors that go into it, and I can't get into specific details around all the numbers just yet, but the main impetus for doing the project in the first place was that we wanted to do something that was awesome for the community. We'd heard that feedback right about 2 years ago, that people wanted to see the franchise return to PC, and that kind of fervor from the community gave us kind of the confidence that we could return the franchise to PC and kind of do this project. And from an economic standpoint, we wanted to make the game really affordable. So, we have only the $20 price point on it for both games, for all the expansions, for all the, extra content and bonus gallery and everything that we've added in with no microtransactions. So we wanted to make the game really affordable. And that obviously, does impact a bit kind of the potential revenue for the title, depending on, just kind of what type of audience comes out for it. Mm-hmm. So we do have, some internal goals, based off kind of the budget that we'd put together. What I can say is that, we've been incredibly humbled by the launch so far. If you, follow kind of the Steam sales charts, which, you can just find online, we were kind of hanging out there in the top of the charts for kind of the past 2 weeks, leading up from our preload time kind of through launch and launch weekend and trailing and following up some of that kind of launch week. And so we're really excited by the response, and it gives us kind of renewed hope that Command and Conquer it still can be a really relevant franchise for today's gamers. So in terms of kind of what's next, I know that's a really popular question right now in terms of the potential for future stuff. What I can say is that right now we're focused solely on, kind of our launch support. Mm-hmm. So, we are, reacting to all the community feedback that's been coming in, the bugs that people have been encountering, the quality of life improvements people want to see, some of the features that, just slipped from launch that we still wanted to complete, that we're planning to update here pretty soon. And so our focus is entirely on that, but we're going to continue to see kind of the reactions from launch and see what the future could hold.
I am Prite. I like your question. I'm going to get to it later, however, because I'd like to springboard off Tough Lipton's question here, which is before the late, great Eric Martin, GDI General Shepard, passed away, was he aware of the remaster? Follow-up question, what was it like? I know that you recorded some of the voice lines from one actor for the remaster. What was it kind of like working with the classic actors for this remaster, who definitely in the 90s when they were filming this probably never had any idea that the game they were working on would find this kind of fan base?
Yeah, we actually got back in touch with a lot of the actors who participated in the original games, effectively to get kind of their permission, mm-hmm. And their blessing to kind of reuse a lot of their content. And everybody was super supportive of that notion, and they really wanted to see the game come out again and to see those performances shine again. And so that was really great to see from everybody. And yeah, most of them, like you said, they never knew that this was going to take off and become, a big game or a franchise that was beloved by millions of people. But they've always been humbled, and they'll say that they still get notes from fans, and they'll bump into people who recognize them, and that's always really cool. For Eric Martin, it was obviously super sad when he passed. He himself wasn't aware of I don't think the remaster when we were kicking it off, but we did get in touch with his family as part of this process, and they were very happy that he was going to be able to have his kind of legacy live on in the remaster, and we hope that people like yourself who never played the original games are now getting a chance to kind of discover that performance and remember him in that way. And fortunately, we then were able to work with some of the crew that had done the original games, like Kaya Hunsinger and Frank Kopacki, who was the original composer for the games and worked on us with the remaster and remastered all the music. He was still in touch with Kaya, and so we were able to bring her into the studio and get her to re-record all of her lines in high definition. And it was, for me as a super fan and a kid, growing up with this franchise, getting to meet her and getting to see her perform all these lines again, it was a surreal experience. And just a real pleasure. And everyone who worked on the game was just incredible, professional, and took it all very very seriously, and tried to deliver their best performance that they could. So it was just awesome, and it kind of gives you those kind of happy chills when you first hear some of those lines being re-recorded here 25 years later.
I'm getting chills just thinking about it, mostly because I can just imagine it. Like I said, no attachment to Command Conquer, but there are other games and franchises where it's like getting the classic people back in the studio for that. Like, it moves me too, and which is funny, like the things that can move you about that. That's super great to hear that his family, Martin's family, was involved in the process, because it's surprising to see the game industry have to start to deal with the fact that of using people's likenesses long after they've passed. It's just such a new kind of challenge that, especially now that digital recreations are becoming so prevalent, the ethical issues there. It's like, oh, well, no, that's Hollywood's problem. And it's like, well, no, it's our problem too, it turns out. That was a comment, not a question. Sorry about that. What RedTieGuy, I swear, Twitch chat, you are stealing all the questions that I was thinking about beforehand and just asking them in chat, so I have to keep crediting you. RedTieGuy has the perfect question for this, for these uncertain times, which is, what were some of the development challenges the team had once EA began transitioning to work from home? Because, reminder, we're in a global once-in-a-century global pandemic. Please wear a mask and keep 6 feet apart while you're in public.
So first, RedTieGuy, I watch all your videos, so thanks for all the coverage over the past 18 months following the game. We started working from home. It was literally like 3 days after we kind of did our big kind of announcement back in March. So we kind of made this big announcement. We announced our launch date. We're like, we're coming out in June, and then we learned we had to kind of final the game working from home. Which was going to be, a crazy logistical challenge. And, the teams just really, continued to pour their heart and soul into the game. They continued to work in just a fantastic way together. And, we'd already been kind of working a little bit kind of remotely. Obviously, I'm based here in San Francisco, and Petroglyph is in Las Vegas, and Lemon Sky is in Malaysia. So we already had a little bit of that kind of relationship in terms of, how to work kind of in a distributed way. But obviously then all the individual people at Petroglyph were working from home. So the biggest impact was around kind of our testing capabilities. Our QA team is overseas in EA Studios over in Europe and in India. And so, they were also working from home, and they didn't have as much access to some of their hardware. We weren't able to utilize some of our larger PC hardware testing facilities because we just couldn't access those. And so the biggest challenge is that there were certain bugs, there were certain optimization items that we just weren't able to get to in the same way. And we've seen a couple of those things come up with launch now that we're seeing, tens of thousands of people play the game. And running into some of these issues. So we're kind of now getting that feedback from the community, and we're trying to almost use their data in a way, their feedback on Reddit and things about how to troubleshoot some of these items. And we're hoping to improve some of those in our upcoming patch. But yeah, it was kind of more the testing angle that became really the biggest challenge with the work from home situation.
That's super helpful to hear, hearing developers be frank about what it's been like developing and finishing games under a global pandemic while working from home. It's both a strange situation where, like you said, there's some remote like workflows built already. So for so many people, it's like, oh, well, that's not a problem. And then you just stumble into the couple things that turned out to be problems that sort of no one, I guess, anticipated. I have about, I think about 10 minutes left on our clock. If you have 10 minutes for me, Jim.
Of course, as much time as you need.
Sweet. Let's see. Let's jump off of, it looks like SGOR00's question, Score00's question. I don't know how you pronounce that. Their question's been answered in chat by other folks, but I will jump off. One really cool thing that you all did was that you released the source code for Command and Conquer a couple weeks ago, which is a boon for modders. It's a boon for other developers. Can you talk behind that decision and sort of what you feel that enabled, like why that was a good thing to do for a developer to release the source code, even while you were trying to sell a remastered collection?
Yeah, well, we wanted to do it for the community. I mean, the community is the group that has been keeping, not only these two games alive over the past 10 to 15 years with a lot of their community projects and mod support, but really kind of the franchise on PC in general, the Command & Conquer franchise. This is our first PC release in 10 years. And so it's really the community that has been keeping the franchise alive in that way. And we felt it was the right thing to do for them. It's something they've been requesting of EA for over a decade. And so we wanted to do it for them in order to, give them that ownership to really take this franchise and these older titles into the future with us. And so it was a process that took a long time. It was a lot of different groups within EA that kind of need to review that and sign off on that. But we were happy to try and do that for the fans. And we even worked directly with the community to on the actual license that we wanted to use to make sure that it was going to be compatible with some of their fan projects like OpenRA and CNCNet. And so, that's how we came upon the GPL license. Mm-hmm. And it was just great to collaborate with the community leadership to make sure that this was going to be a really celebratory moment for everybody involved. And, we've already seen, I think, over like 2,500 mods or, maps and mods put up on the Steam Workshop in like the first, week and a half. And so it sounds like it's really resonating well with the community and that they're able to do these really cool things. And, we hope to see that continue to flourish going forward.
Right on. I think we're going to grab two more questions and then call it a day. Nilzon has a good question. How is EA... Actually, I'm going to name the two people I'm going to take questions from. Nilzon and Swedish Lilac. We're going to get to your questions before we get out of here. Nilzon would like to know, are competitive balance fixes planned, like imbalance maps or underused unit breaks? That's an interesting question because to follow up for other devs, when you remaster a game like this, in theory, you're like, we need to preserve as much of the original game balance as possible, even if it was bad, because that was the original game. But if you're supporting a live game, one that may get a competitive scene, I don't know if this has a competitive scene, but if it does, we'll just assume it does for a second. How do you make that experience good for players today? Like, that's such an interesting question that has come up in these remastered conversations.
Yeah, it's been really top of mind for us, and it's been one of the top community feedback topics since we launched. And going back to kind of those original creative pillars, our goal was to keep it extremely authentic, to get that same feel and those same strategies kind of working in the same way that people would have experienced with the older games. And another thing for us with balance is that all the balance was kind of tied together. So we didn't want to risk ruining the campaign or changing things like that with some of the balance changes. Now that we've launched, we're looking at some really targeted fixes immediately. One that we're updating, for example, in this upcoming patch is, when you're on low power in Red Alert, you're essentially you're completely out of the game. It takes like 27 times longer to build something if you're out of power, and it's almost more like a bug fix than a balance change, but it's something that we are going to update based off the community really being upset about it. We are also actually just yesterday, we updated our quick match rule set based on community feedback to change kind of the base default rules for quick match. We swapped in and out a few of the quick match maps and we're going to be hopefully doing a few more of those in the upcoming patch based off further feedback. So we're looking at like targeted changes that we think are really impacting the game, but we're still trying to understand if we should, look at kind of a bigger balance pass, or if that would kind of change the spirit of what we set out to do too much. So we're still kind of looking at that, but we are in the meantime trying to do some of these targeted fixes.
Man, you're about to see me really learn for the first time why ground units can't walk over Tiberium. Swedish Lilac's question was, Jim, if you can make an entirely new Command and Conquer from the ground up, would you want to?
Well, I mean, I'll just say, yeah, that would be amazing. As a fan of the series since I was, 12 years old, and then having the chance to work on the Command and Conquer games from 2006 to 2010 with, CNC 3 and Kane's Wrath and Red Alert 3. Those were some of my favorite kind of development projects I've ever been on. And then going on this journey with the community and with Petroglyph, it's just been fantastic. And so CNC has been kind of intertwined with my personal gaming life and my professional career life, for as far as I can remember. And so, I would love to continue working on CNC. And we'll have to see what the future holds. Like I said, right now we're really just focused on supporting the launch of the Remastered Collection. But sure, I mean, who if you're a fan of a franchise like that, who wouldn't want to be able to continue working on it?
Right on. I can certainly agree with that sensibility. Jim, there's some kind of EA event going on tomorrow, isn't there? I guess we should give a plug for that.
Yeah, I think we're doing our kind of EA Play showcase.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to last around an hour. And you should check online for kind of your local times on when it's going to show up. It'll be streaming online. We're hoping to kind of have a little bit of a celebratory call out there for the Remastered Collection. It should be a great event. And hope you all check it out to see everything that is coming up with EA.
Right on. My current EA game that I am personally can't stop playing is Apex Legends, so shout out to the folks at Respawn in case they happen to be watching. With that, I'm going to start wrapping it up. Thank you all in Twitch chat for joining us. Thank you to the Command and Conquer community, because not only do we have you to thank in part for this game along with EA and Petroglyph and Lemon Sky, but if you all for showing up today and you all for being a big impetus force for this game existing. Like I said, I am a newcomer to your world, and I thank you for sort of building the foundation that I get to come in on. And with that, Jim, I assume this community has big ties to your Discord, your forums, etc. I assume that's already sort of generally known, but in case there was a question they didn't get answered today and they would like to have it answered, where should they go?
Yeah, I think posting in the Command and Conquer subreddit is a place that I'm often checking all the posts. And then there's a bunch of community pockets in Discord where you can post, and if I don't see those directly, then they'll often be relayed to me with our community council. Please continue providing the feedback and questions, and I'll do my best to respond to as many as I can.
Right on. Now, before I horribly fail this mission, I'm going to bring things to a close, and one more shout out. Chat, I can't say enough how great it is to start live streaming again on this channel and to come back with such a supportive, welcoming audience that is out there. So with that, have a good day, everyone. Bye.